Former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb has a new gig that we want to talk about this morning. He was elected late last month to the board of directors at Pfizer and also appointed to the board's regulatory and compliance and science and technology committees. Joining us right now to talk about more of this, as well as drug pricing and his thoughts on Medicare for All proposals, is Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who is the former FDA Commissioner, also a CNBC contributor. And Scott, it's good to see you this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk first about the Pfizer board position. How'd this come about?
Well, they approached me. I'm proud of the relationship. I mean, this is a big global public health platform, and it's going to give me a chance to continue to weigh in on the issues that I'm, very committed to. Pfizer's not just made big investments in areas of unmet medical need. They've also made big investments in areas of global public health, like vaccines, like sterile injectable drugs, like generic medicines. And so this is going to be a good relationship, and I'm really proud to be a part of it.
All right, we're going to put you through the paces immediately. There's a story in the Wall Street Journal today that says yesterday, 20 different drug companies raised their prices on their official list prices for their drugs. I think the average was about 13%. So what do you tell Pfizer in terms of raising drug prices? Because that's something you fought pretty hard as FDA commissioner.
Yeah, well, look, I'm new, and I'm going to leave decisions like that, the operating decisions, to the management team, which I have a lot of confidence in. I've spent a lot of time with them over the last several weeks, last month, in meeting with them, and I have a lot of confidence in the team at Pfizer, and I've known the company for a while. Look, companies make these price increases on a fairly regular schedule, typically in July and typically at the end of the year. So it's not surprising that we're seeing some price increases right now. When I looked at the data on the price increases, a lot of them were for old sterile injectable drugs, where I think that there's been market failures and underinvestment for very prolonged periods of time. And we talk a lot about drugs that are priced too high, and there are many drugs that are priced too high, in my view, relative to the value that they're delivering. But there's also some drugs that are priced too low, and it's creating shortage situations. And that happens to be with the old injectable generic medicines, where it's not a trivial function manufacturing these drugs, and you want to have investments in manufacturing, and you want to have new entrants, and we haven't seen that over time. And so we've seen these shortages of hospital-based drugs. That's where a lot of the price increases, when I looked at the data, were taken.
When you start talking about some of those things, I mean, that was a market that Martin Shkreli managed to kind of manipulate and be able to raise prices on that. As FDA director, you tried to do things to make it easier for other companies to compete in that arena. Has it gotten easier?
Well, he did something different. He picked off a low-volume generic drug where there weren't a lot of competitors, and then jacked up the price. And he played what I would call a regulatory arbitrage. He knew that it would take time for FDA to get new generic drugs into the market to compete with him. What we've done there, what we did there was prioritize the entrant of second and third to market generic medicine, so that people who tried to play that kind of regulatory arbitrage knew that they were going to face competition more quickly. And I think it has gotten easier to get second and third to market generic innovation onto the market, and it's discouraged that kind of behavior. The one place where we still see market failures is in the places where it's difficult to manufacture these drugs, and that's, again, with the injectable drugs that need to be sterile medicines, things like, hospital-injected chemotherapeutics or anti-infectives, where we've seen these chronic shortages. That's been a little bit more of a market failure, and I think we need to rethink how we reimburse some of those medicines under Medicare to try to create a more robust market for those drugs. That happens to be a small segment of the market, but it's a very important segment of the market because they're hospital-based drugs typically.
Scott, last week we watched the Democratic debates and heard a lot about Medicare for All. Some of the candidates who raised their hand and said they'd like to get rid of the private insurance industry overall. What do you think about the feasibility of some of these plans? Which ones sound like good ideas? Which ones concern you?
Well, I don't think it's really that feasible, quite frankly. I think that, some people are campaigning on the idea of extending Medicare for all and going towards really what would be a single-payer system. I think the most likely outcome would probably be some kind of Medicare buy-in for a younger age population, maybe 50 and over would have an option of buying into Medicare. And that's something that's been talked about in the past. My biggest concern, or I have a lot of concerns about Medicare for all, would crowd out competition in private insurance and crowd out the kind of competition that puts downward pressure, not just on the prices of drugs, but also on the prices of healthcare services like doctor services. So you'd see less choice in the marketplace. But ultimately, Medicare has been a a slow payer for new technology. It has slowed the diffusion of new technology, and it's been slow to embrace changes in the practice of medicine. Most of the changes in the practice of medicine have really happened as a result of private coverage for new innovation and new delivery, not just innovation in technology, but new ways of delivering care on the part of physicians. And Medicare has been behind. And so I think if Medicare is the only payer in the marketplace, they're going to set the pace on new innovation, and ultimately they're going to slow innovation in medical care.
I saw in your notes you said that some companies, some private insurers pay for all sorts of options that Medicare won't, and that's what you're worried about losing. What are some examples of that? What are private insurers paying for that Medicare refuses right now?
Well, CAR-T was the most recent example. I mean, CAR-T is a new way. It's a gene therapy approach to treating cancer. There's been some highly effective treatments approved on the market. Novartis had a drug that had the first CAR-T therapeutic approved when I was at FDA, and Medicare hasn't quite figured out how to pay for the delivery of this medicine in the hospital environment, so that when hospitals are delivering CAR-T therapy, they're actually losing money on it each time. And what we're seeing is a lot of physicians in hospitals are steering patients towards clinical trials where the drug's getting reimbursed rather than just prescribing the drug outright. So we see all kinds of distortions in how care is being delivered as a result of the fact that Medicare hasn't quite figured out what the right reimbursement level is and what the right mechanism for paying for this is. And we're now 2 years into it. And, this has been on the market for about 2 years, and we knew it was coming to the market. And so that shows you that, Medicare really struggles to come up with payment schemes to embrace really disruptive new technology that don't fit into the traditional ways of paying for things.
Hey, Scott, you were praised in your role as the FDA Commissioner, and I give you a lot of credit for what you did, but there are going to be critics today who are critics of the revolving door between Washington and the private sector are going to say, you know what, maybe he wasn't tough enough on the drug companies, and if he was, he wouldn't be in this role. What do you say to them?
Well, look, I feel very confident about my record at the agency and the fact that I called balls and strikes and acted in the interest of the public health and the public interest. Look, I worked in the life sciences sector before I came into the agency, and there was a lot written about my prior roles in the industry and in venture capital. And I've largely returned to doing what I was doing prior to my work at the FDA. I've returned to the same venture capital firm and the same think tank in Washington. And I worked with some large drug makers before I came into the agency. This new role at Pfizer clearly is a bigger role than what I did before I came into the FDA. It's something I'm very proud of, something where I think I can make a lot of contributions over time. But I made no bones about, the fact that I had expertise in the life sciences and, made my living trying to promote innovation in this sector prior to coming into the agency.
Dr. Gottlieb, I want to thank you for your time today. It's good to see you.
Thanks a lot.